Okay, Chapter 60, Dispatch Activities. Well, we know dispatch occurs through the communication center, and depending on where you live, the communication center can be a standalone communication center, can be part of another organization, like out of a sheriff's office. Back when I first started, we dispatched ambulances out of the hospital itself. But the communication center is the central nervous system for the EMS. It is the first point of contact for patients and callers. And most comm centers incorporate the use of 911 or E911. A dispatcher is highly trained. They have to determine the correct response location, usually determined by protocols that have been preset. They complete pre-arrival patient assessments. They may give pre-arrival instructions and treatments if they are EMD certified. They may assign and alert responding crews. They track progress of the case. They manage the system's mobile resources. And they may be experts in patient care. We have many paramedics that actually dispatch. High-tech tools are used in dispatch as well. There's computer-sided dispatch. There are mobile devices. There are electronic geographical information systems like GPS. Automated system status management. So within a comm center, they know exactly where the vehicles are at all times. It's kind of like GPS. And these high-functioning systems would allow dispatchers to direct and guide perhaps a lost EMS response vehicle having trouble finding the scene. Some standard functions of emergency medical dispatchers is to receive the 911 calls, to identify the address, to get some information about the patient, and then identify any scene hazards, and then assign the call to the responding agencies depending upon protocol. Some have automated dispatch systems where with the push of a single button they're able to dispatch fire, law, EMS, and perhaps multiple EMS agencies, those that are first responding and those that transport. Some standard functions continued also include pre-arrival instructions. Again, if they're emergency medical dispatch trained, they may give pre-arrival instructions to the caller on how to do CPR, how to control hemorrhage, those sort of things. They're also important in communicating and coordinating the incident information. They keep track of your times. They know what units are out and where. They are responsible for notifying other people that need to be notified. And some dispatch centers schedule interfacility and non-emergency transports as well. Address verification in an emergency medical dispatch center is extremely important. It's a critical first step. With 911 callers, it could be a variety of different ways to identify the address. With the E911 and mobile cell phones now have GPS locators as well. The National Institute of Health's Emergency Medical Dispatcher document establishes protocols for systematic caller integration questions that are primary complaint specific. So if a person called in and said, well, I'm having chest pain, they could flip to the chest pain card and there would be some systematized pre-arrival instructions and protocols that determine what vehicles should respond at what emergency, non-emergency response based on the dispatcher's evaluation of the injury or illness, and also other referenced information that the dispatcher may use can be found on these cards as well. Now, where I'm from, we at one point had people that were trained in EMD, but the cost of recertification and keeping up has been has been very difficult for most emergency medical dispatch centers to recertify their folks. So we don't see this high a level of functioning of our emergency medical dispatchers. In other words, our dispatchers are not making decisions on who to send. It's all done in protocol, or it's all done by um, uh, service guided dispatch parameters. The National Institute of Health's recommended elements for an effective emergency medical dispatch program: you have to have medical dispatch protocols, you have to provide pre-arrival instructions, dispatchers have to be trained, they have to be certified, there has to be QA, QI concerning their ability to use those protocols effectively, and again, the cost of that precludes many of the rural areas from keeping their dispatchers certified as EMDs. State regulations and continuing education requirements vary from state to state. I'm not very familiar with the state of Iowa, other than I don't believe that they require any sort of initial training certification or continuing education for emergency medical dispatchers. I think that's up to the sheriff in many cases, or whoever who the EMA coordinator perhaps may also oversee the dispatch center, and it's kind of up to them as to what sort of training that the dispatchers receive, and what sort of continuing education they're allowed to get. Um, Protocols may serve as a standard of care because they're predictable, they're reproducible, they're specific, and there are sequenced actions, and they're also definable and deliver a measurable result. So we run on protocols as paramedics, and our protocols reflect a standard of care for what we do. Emergency medical dispatchers also have protocols in a high functioning system, and they use those protocols as a standard of care for emergency medical dispatching. There are call taking protocols so that they can get an accurate and orderly information gathering, they can do proper triage and prioritization, and then they can deliver pre-scripted pre-arrival instructions. Protocols differ from guidelines and telephone aid. Um, uh, and again, most communication centers that dispatch EMS have predetermined protocols of who to dispatch where, and when. Provision of pre-arrival instruction is a standard of care. In many areas, it's a public expectation that when they call 911, that the 911 dispatcher gives them important information, like how to control hemorrhage, or if a person's having a heart attack, to give an aspirin, or how to do CPR. They also expect a 0-minute response. In other words, from the time that they call in, that should be less than a minute by the time the proper service is dispatched. And failure to do so, failure to provide pre-arrival instructions, failure to launch with less than a minute, it really puts a communication center at legal risk from liability of not performing the standard of care. And that's the argument that people use to try to get emergency medical dispatch centers to get dispatchers trained and certified as EMDs, is that they're probably at a greater risk not being trained as EMDs than just doing their own thing. Some medical legal danger zones related to emergency medical dispatch. If the dispatcher fails to verify the address or get a callback number, if they fail to send the wrong type of service, and for many of us that's not an issue. We have one service and that's it, or it's built into the protocols where you have you dispatch the local service in that community, and a paramedic tier is an automatic response. Some other danger zones is dispatch diagnosis being incorrect, significantly delaying the response of responders, If a person has to call more than once to 911 in order to get a response, if there are no protocols to follow, really puts them in a medical legal danger area. And then if they don't follow those protocols exactly, that's the one downfall of protocols, and that's what people who dislike protocols will tell you, is that if you've got protocols, then you have to do all the things in that protocol, and if you vary away from that, you better have a good reason why that happened. Some other danger zones include requesting permission to give pre-arrival instructions, asking to talk with the patient, attitude problems or argumentative interrogation of the caller, preconceived notion of the caller's motives in the situation, in other words, frequent flyers. When somebody calls, oh, they're just help, I've fallen and I can't get up, and they're crying wolf, and having that sort of preconceived notion really puts them at risk. Problems at shift changes, and then first party gone on arrival situations. Best practices and benchmarking for emergency medical dispatchers would include accreditation. Accreditations would establish a formal program. Accreditation has been shown to improve service quality and performance standards. The oversight process for emergency medical dispatchers is a steering committee or a dispatch review committee, somebody that reviews the individual dispatch cases, and I don't see this happening a lot unless there's an issue. If there's a problem that's brought up, then certainly the tapes are listened to and things are determined, but I don't know that on a regular basis directors of dispatch centers are randomly doing quality audits on the dispatch prioritization procedures. Response assignment plans, making sure that they're up to date so that they do send the right people to the right place. Benchmarking is the ability to compare yourself to others, and if we had truly a national emergency medical dispatch certification and accreditation, they would be able to share policies, procedures, and protocols with other dispatch centers to see how they're doing business, and I'm sure some of that occurs just like it does in EMS. Call triage. That's classifying on the basis of severity of illness or injury. After getting the correct location, then getting some basic information about what is the problem, how old is the patient, are they awake, are they breathing, any other complaint-specific questions, and then based on that information, identifying whether it's an emergency or a non-emergency transport. Some common dispatch priorities include sudden cardiac arrest, chest pain, traffic accident with injuries, unknown problems, diabetic with high blood sugar or diabetic with blood sugar problems, period. Minor trauma with an injured ankle would be a very low priority dispatch. Dispatch assigns the correct responders driven by the triage and follows again a response assignment plan. So the dispatcher is going to typically dispatch the closest first response service and transporting service if they are different, and dispatch them at either emergency or non-emergency. And we know that when responding to a particular emergency or non-emergency is dispatched by our comm center, that when we get there, it may be opposite of what they dispatch us for. But the important objective of response prioritization is to match the EMS resources used to the patient's clinical needs, and also to limit the use of lights and sirens to only really critical cases. There's a big move in Iowa as well nationally of eliminating the use of lights and sirens, period. There's just so much data out there that shows that allowing people to drive carelessly because they have lights and sirens going is just not working for emergency medical services, law enforcement, or fire. We can count to many and many collisions, deaths, related to driving carelessly just because you've got lights and sirens going and thinking that people hear you, see you, that sort of thing. The National Institute of Health goals is that for quality improvement would be that dispatchers understand policies, protocols, and practices. They comply with those policies, protocols, and practices, and that if deficiencies are noted, that they are corrected, and that policies, protocols, and practices are updated on a regular basis. Quality improvement in an emergency medical dispatch center, just like with EMS service, should include physician oversight. And again, this is something that we don't see a lot of, where our physicians are providing medical control to ensure that protocols, particularly pre-arrival instruction protocols, are being followed appropriately. And then the physician oversight is also supposed to be available to help provide ongoing education. Performance monitoring and feedback is all part of quality improvement as well, and this is consistently evaluating cases, whether you do every single call that is dispatched or whether you randomly select 10%, 20%, 40%, whatever, and review how the call went. In any event, quality improvement needs to be timely, and it needs to be objective, not subjective. It needs to be what you actually hear, see, as opposed to what somebody may tell you. Performance improvement can be accomplished by a committee, can be accomplished by a quality improvement unit if you want to set it up that way. And again, random case selection works best for quality improvement. I think what most people are doing is they'll do a random case selection if they're doing anything at all, and definitely those cases that are brought to the attention of the director of the comm center. Performance monitoring and feedback, some key clinical performance indicators is that dispatchers are able to correctly identify the primary complaint, that they are in compliance with their dispatch protocols, that they are dispatching calls appropriately as emergency or non-emergency, that they are in compliance with getting all the information they can concerning cardiac arrest, and to include pre-arrival instructions, and also pre-arrival instructions with near arrest and respiratory failure issues. Factors that are uncontrollable for dispatchers, as with all of us, are going to include language barriers, the level of activity within a system. Certainly you have systems that are far more robust than others. You have systems that require 2 or 3 dispatchers to be on site at all times. In other places you may have a single dispatcher who may rely on a jailer or somebody to jump in and help once in a while. The nature of the call, the dispatcher has no control over the types of calls that are going to come into the comm center. And then the caller's state of mind, the caller's knowledge of what is occurring, and the caller's knowing where they're located. Staffing is often limited. The type of telephone, the call processing technology used in the comm center are factors that are controllable. Staffing is controllable. The availability, reliability of geographic information and databases is controllable with GPS and all those other things, as well as development of proper dispatch protocols. So components of an EMD call processing. The call is received at the Emergency Medical Dispatch Center. It's answered by a dispatcher. They get the address and the phone number verified. Then they evaluate the call, the scene conditions. A case is queued for dispatch. A unit is selected. The EMS crew is notified. And typically this should be done in less than 2 minutes. Unit selection. After the incident is address is verified and recorded, preliminary final incident type is coded. Dispatchers will alert the closest available first responder and ambulance. Tracking occurs through radio communication, GPS, those sort of things. They know when the unit left, when they got to the scene, when they left back to the hospital, when they got to the hospital, when they're leaving the hospital, and they're available to take another call. Um, Unit selection and incident tracking. The comm center must maintain current status and location of all units in the system. Non-emergency care in a communication center is often a secondary function and may have to wait, may have to be scheduled at a later time. This may include facility-to-facility transfer. It requires less detailed assessment, but does require careful documentation. Performance-based response systems are typically seen in private EMS services. The municipality sets the required response times. They must have a deployment plan that matches the EMS responder resources to call demand, and it's the comm center that executes this plan and manages the entire system. Some technology, CAD systems, computer-aided dispatch systems, 800 megahertz radios, two-way radios, DVD audio recording systems, mobile data devices, digital paging, GPS, global positioning, real-time unit deployment, demand displays where you actually have a screen that shows where the ambulance is located on a map and the direction it's going to help them locate the scene. And here's just some pictures of some of those different sort of technology based communication equipment. New horizons in emergency medical dispatch includes biosurveillance for infectious disease, public health, and early warning systems. So better methods and practices of collecting and interpreting disease information, the use of 911 calls in real time, come to a centralized, standardized database, and through epidemiology, through their ability to look at like types of calls or a consistent pattern of dispatching for many people with the same signs and symptoms. Their surveillance, they're able to determine earlier than later that a potentially infectious disease is present. Early warning surveillance systems rely on standardization, speed, sensitivity, and specificity, as well as ethical considerations, and data has to be compared with historical records to look for significant anomalies and to trigger alerts. And I don't know many EMD that's doing biosurveillance. There are many labs in most of the hospitals around the state that do biosurveillance. As they're getting lab tests, the results of those tests, particularly if there's a lot of people reporting with influenza A or B, that stuff is reported to a state epidemiologist who is surveilling disease pockets in the state and can identify areas that are have certain diseases and plan accordingly. All right, so with that, that was a quick review of a highly functional emergency medical dispatch center, and I know across the state of Iowa that they vary from county to county. Some are far more technical than others, but all in all, I know that they are great folks. They work hard. They're often forgotten when it comes to things like critical incident stress debriefing. They have an extremely difficult job when it comes to major emergencies within a county or a jurisdiction, and we should include them in all our discussions and developments. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to Chapter 61 here at some point, and if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. So I'll talk to you soon.